You're watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Virgin Bet.
Hello and welcome to All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Virgin Bet with me, Steve Sidwell and Wayne Bridge. Joining us today, do you know what? It doesn't feel right. Should we, could you do this for us, please?
Well, it's a very warm welcome to All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Virgin Bet, with the Premier League's second most famous Ginger behind the variously pronounced Kevin De Bruyne, Brunner, Steve Sidwell, and the former, it says Premier League here, the former England left-back, on whom I commentated on the only memorable moment in his entire career. What on earth were you doing there? You're supposed to be marking Robert Pires, you know? Wayne Bridge.
If you haven't guessed who this is already, this man is one of the most iconic voices in the game. He has led the ITV commentary team at 5 World Cups, 5 European Championships, been the lead commentator on 25 European Champions League finals, wow, including the famous Man United final of 99 and Liverpool in Istanbul. A commentator
That was
of
my
9.
dad. I'm only 23.
A commentator of 9 FA Cup finals as well. Look, it can only be the one and only Clive Tyldesley. Clive, absolute pleasure to have you on.
I mean, I've got to say, it is mad to meet you because the voice,
Yeah.
and then you finally see. I couldn't stop smiling when we met him in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
I was like, it just seems mad to put your face to the voice.
It's-
Obviously seen you on TV, but to meet you,
I've got a voice for
brilliant.
radio, a face for radio.
Look, Clive, just reading that, I mean, it's just amazing what you've done in obviously your career and the games that you've been involved in, the tournaments you've been involved in.
I'm trying to convince people today that I can still do this job, and people keep talking about games I commentated on 60 years ago. No wonder I can't get any work anymore.
But
I'm still alive.
You're still doing it now. But do you pinch yourself? Because I know you're a huge football fan and you love the game. But do you pinch yourself and just realise that what you've achieved?
The people I've been privileged enough to meet and get close to is the biggest bonus. I mean, in sort of contemporary football, Gareth Southgate, who we're going to talk about, was at our wedding. He's a mate. But to have been close to Sir Alex Ferguson and Bill Shankly and Brian Clough, and the life lessons you learn you'll have managers who you maybe hated at the time, but now when you reflect, what you learned about them, about values and standards, about how to live your life as well as to live your professional career. Yeah. So just to be around truly great people, great's an overused word in football, but I have been around some truly great people.
Yeah. Look, we're going to come into managers a bit later on. Look, we want to go straight into it. Look, you basically you're the voice that brings back so many memories to people as well. But just talk us about like the prep that actually goes in to doing commentary. So, for instance, talk us through the week for the build up to like a Champions League final, for instance, because you can't just rock up on the day, know your stuff, and then crack on. There's a lot more to that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, people often ask how much preparation you do, and the answer is simple: enough.
Yeah, enough
to fit. Again, there are lots of parallels between what I've been doing for the last 100 years and what you guys have been doing. If you run out at whatever 10 to 3, if there is such a thing as a 3 o'clock kickoff anymore, and you know that either you're not feeling great or you're carrying a bit of one, or maybe you did have a night out on Wednesday and you just don't feel whatever.
There's a few that have done that.
And you can't afford it. I mean, the margins are so slender in the modern game that you'll get found out.
Yeah.
And you know it in your own mind. And sometimes at the end of the game, somebody will pat you on the back and say, well played, you were great today. And you know in your own mind you weren't. And equally, the opposite can happen. Well, I'm the same. Yeah. I mean, as long as when the red light comes on and Mark Pugac or Laura Woods or whoever it is hands to me, as long as I feel confident with what's in front of me. And I have the notes. And I'm just going to surprise Wayne with some notes that I've produced for him.
So these would be sort of the ideal commentary notes that you would have done before.
This is a little bit different. There are two kinds of we have a little business now with prints of the notes that I did.
You can plug it, don't worry, it's all good.
Is this the original though?
It's called commentary charts.
Commentary charts.
Yeah, and commentarycharts.com. You'll find some great games, but you'll also find some great seasons. And what we've got here is what I keep for every major club, really, which are the results and appearances. And I do it obviously week by week so that I can refer to, and I've got my own reference. And this is Chelsea's 2004-2005 season.
Wow.
Oh, mate,
Look
I'm
at
absolutely
that.
buzzing with that.
Look at that.
Honestly, thank you
is
so
absolutely
much.
brilliant.
I
So,
honestly love that.
so-
Absolutely.
So much.
so
I've got
on that-
2 more requests actually. I'll speak to you after about that.
So Clive, just on that is the season and the players and each performance, is it what they've done and goals?
Yeah, goals,
Wow.
substitute appearances, unused substitute, league position, attendance.
How many goals did Bridgie get that year? Do we know?
He only scored one in his career, didn't he? That was the only one.
It was the one.
Oh,
though.
so yeah. Actually, I remember your actual commentary for that game. I think it was like Wayne Bridge, Idiger Johnson. It's Bridge. It's in. It's Chelsea's night. Wayne Bridge has scored with only 3 minutes left to play, and Claudio Ranieri is celebrating a victory which must mean so much to him. I've only watched it once. So I've done well to remember that.
He still managed to bugger it up in the semi-finals, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. To be fair.
Look, we're going to come on to Champions League as well. Just staying on your day as well. On the day of the game, obviously most people know what it's like for a footballer. They turn up for the game at 1:30, bit of pre-match, or the team's been down, then they go and play. What's it like for a commentator on the day of the game?
We tend to be among the first there. I mean, my predecessor at ITV was the late great Brian Moore.
Yeah.
And in 1998, he retired after the World Cup finals, and ITV threw a little dinner. Only about 20 people, and some really famous names there. Des Lynam and people like that were working for us at the time. And they sat me next to Mauro, and we both like our red wine. And 2 or 3 bottles down the line, we get to the end of the evening, and he taps me on the arm and he says, "There are only 2 things you need to remember." And I thought, oh, great. The doyen of football commentary is about to impart the secrets of the job to me, and I'm pissed. I'm not going to be able to remember this in the morning. And he said, "Be on time and be warm enough."
Very true.
And then I'm thinking, is that it? Is that the best you can do? All your years in the business. And a year later, he was in the car with me driving to the most important football match I've ever commentated on, which was the Champions League final of 1999, because it was the climax of the first season after Brian Moore. And basically, if I'd messed up that night, I wouldn't be sitting here now. And he had a little kind of corporate appointment with UEFA, and he came in the car with me to Nou Camp, and I'm fairly nervous, and he tapped me on the arm again. He says, "Do you remember what I said to you?" I said, "I do, yeah, Brian," and it was a major disappointment. If you don't mind me saying, it was be on time and be warm enough. Yeah. And he said, "I was saying to you, I think you're good enough. I think you're good enough to do this job, but you won't be good enough if you're late or if you're too cold." And it was actually the biggest compliment probably anybody's ever given me, in so much that in that simple, and you'll have had managers look into your eye and say, "There's only one thing you've got to remember, and I need to get this in." And it's sometimes something slightly disappointing, but when you reflect on it, they're the only. If you think you are good enough and you've done the preparation, just make sure you're there and make sure you're warm enough.
Yeah, well, warm enough definitely. I've done. Bridget, you've done a bit of punditry on the side. I've done co-coms in some stadiums, and being warm is definitely a big big tip. It is nervous. Because it's one of the ones where when you're next to the lead commentator, they've got their notes and they've got their backup in case it's not a great game and there's not a lot to commentate on, because you can only go in what's in front of you, so they've always got stuff to fall back on. Right. And sometimes silence is key. You don't have to speak.
On TV, yeah. Not so good on radio.
No, of course.
But your job then hasn't been explained to you carefully enough. It's very simple, the co-commentator. The co-commentator is somebody who's been down there across the white line, where I will never go, where Martin Tyler will never go, where Guy Mowbray will never go, and can come back and tell the rest of us what it's like down there, how you win and lose football matches. And so you don't need to know the unbeaten run. You don't need to know which club this player was signed for and when. You're giving us a different kind of insight. Let us manage the stats. Let us manage the facts. Let us manage the narrative of the game, the drama of the game, shout the names out. And then when there is something to analyse, then you tell us what we don't know. Yeah. And that's that's all the job of the pundit and the co-commentator is.
Did those nerves kind of disappear the more you did? Or did you still get nervous?
Yeah, I mean, the nervous energy that I had before that game is the same before any game. It is an opportunity. And again, you'll have been told this in your career. The biggest games you played, in actual fact, are the best chance to show what you can do. Yeah. So the bigger the audience, and I've, as it happens, commentated to an audience, I think, of 28.5 million at an England World Cup semi-final. Well, that's pretty much everybody. You know, and in the Twittered world, you've only got to make one big mistake, and that's the end, really. It's probably you can certainly end your career if you've a mind to, because that's the jeopardy that goes with live broadcasting now. And again, not dissimilar to a footballer. You know, one goalkeeping error, one missed chance, one missed penalty. You know, I mean, asking questions about Harry Kane, really? Because he's missed a penalty. Yeah. I mean, it's going to happen. We're human beings. There's human error, but we're in a pretty unforgiving world now. Yeah. And the analysis of footballers is bizarre. I mean, it's far, far too much. But the analysis of broadcasters, commentators is silly too. Yeah. Certainly online. So there is a respectful nervousness. There is a nervous energy we all need before we perform. But actually, the bigger the match, the better the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go right back to the start. Because we heard there's a great story about you and Brian Clough.
Well, there is, and I can tell it. Brian Clough was, if you like, my first manager. My first job was at a local radio station in Nottingham. And within 6 months, I was covering Nottingham Forest home and away. And Nottingham Forest at the time were a mid-table championship team. But Brian Clough had arrived to manage them. And incredibly, I mean, totally incredibly, I left as they were promoted to the top flight in 1977. They were European champions in 1979 and 1980. So that's what happened. And I think they played a game in their promotion season at York in the December. And I think there were 8 of the 11 players later became European champions. So the team didn't actually change very much from being a mid-table championship. But Cloughie was the manager. He was a little unpredictable, and everybody who played for him at that time would tell you that. But at his best, he was just magnetic. And I often talk about standards. When I'm talking to sort of media students, I talk about standards, and I wonder whether that makes me sound old. And it's interesting how many times you come into contact with people who are half my age, who still believe in the standards that they were given by their first manager or their first coach or their first teacher or by a parent. And standards, I think, are particularly important in your game, and I think they're important in my game. And I can be a bit of a bore on standards in broadcasting. But a simple lesson in standards was I arrived for my first game travelling with the team. We used to travel with the team. I used to travel on, Forest usually went by train, but my next job, I used to travel with the best football team in the world on the team coach, Liverpool or Everton, and stay in the hotel the night before an away game. Guys were the same age as me, they were my mates, you know. Cloughie was never my mate. But I turned up on a Saturday morning for the away. They had an away game in London, so they got the train from Nottingham Station down to Euston, and then got a coach. And I was as smart as I could possibly be. I looked like I just turned up for the junior golf Stableford champion. You know, I had a smart double-breasted blazer. I had a button-down shirt, and we used to call them slacks. You know, trousers with a really sharp crease in them, shiny shoes. And I'm sitting there about 20 minutes before anybody else arrives. And eventually, about 15 minutes before the train leaves, Cloughie gets on. And he says, good morning. And then he sort of walks past me, and then he checks and comes back. He says, young man, you're very welcome to travel with the official Nottingham Forest party, but when you do, you wear a tie. I said, crikey, I'm very, very sorry. I won't let this happen again. I thought he might move on then. Young man, you're very, very welcome to travel with the official Nottingham Forest, but when you do, you wear a tie. I said, well, as soon as we get down to London, I'll find something. There'll be something at the station. I'll get one. Young man, very, very welcome to travel with the official Nottingham. And then he put his hand in his pocket, got out, I think it was a 10 bob note, 10 shillings, and put it in my hand. His train leaves in 15 minutes. And I had to go. I had to run off it was a really hot August morning, and I ran up the platform. And fortunately, there was a gents' outfitters just opening about 100 metres down down the slope from where the Midland station was. I ran in there. The guy was still putting his stuff outside, and I just threw the tip, grabbed a tie, said, "Thank you very much," and ran back. And now my beautiful shirt, I'm sweating and everything. I'm in a state, and he comes back and he goes, "Very smart." And I wore a tie to every football match that I covered from that point, which was 1976 to 1994. I did the opening week of the World Cup finals. I did a game at the Pasadena Rose Bowl in Los Angeles. Brian was dead by now, but I was still turned up in a short sleeve shirt and a tie, and it was about 38 degrees or something. It was absolutely beating down. I was looking around me. Everybody else was in a t-shirt and shorts. Yeah. And I loosened my tie, and at halftime I took it off. And I kind of looked. I'm not a religious person, but I sort of looked up to the heavens and thinking, "You watch, I'm going to hear in a moment, young man."
Look, talking of tournaments, and you've done a hell of a lot. Bridgie, you've been involved with England. Yeah. I'd like to just go onto the England.
How many majors did you go to? 2? 3?
3.
Yeah.
3.
I just want to go into. I want to dive into that, into the England scene, because we're talking France '98, when obviously you worked with Brian Moore, and that was the start of your journey, and that was probably the start of the golden sort of generation as well. So, and you've probably seen it go from its best to its a dip, and hopefully now coming back up to that dip. What was your view in terms of when Mike Owen burst on the scene, and then what happened with England then going forward in terms of the pressure and the scrutiny that was really put on England from a broadcaster's point of view?
Well, the England football team is the most popular team in the country, and we sometimes forget that. I mean, we've got some of the biggest football clubs in the world, in our league, in our country. But television viewing figures are not a true democracy, but you can choose whether to watch a match or not. You can choose whether to turn on or not. And the audience figure for an England tournament game is 2-3 times bigger than for any club football match. Yeah. And this is the nation's team. I've had fans, when I've travelled, and I've done many England games in recent times, and sometimes when you travel, there are fans there of, I don't know, Bishop Stortford or Bishop Auckland, and they said, "This is our Champions League. Our club side will never reach this level, but we travel. These are our boys. For 1 week, a week and a half, these guys belong to us." And with that comes an awful lot of attention and expectation. I think pressure is an overused word in football. What is pressure? For me, it's expectation. Your expectations of yourself and other people's expectations of you. And for some reason, the expectations of you when you wear an England shirt, I mean, you pull the shirt on. It's twice as heavy as a Chelsea shirt, isn't it?
I think it's massive. Since I've been playing, I think it's massive. I don't know if it was massive before that as well. And I don't know if it comes a lot from the press. Well, I would say it comes a lot from the press, but you'll know more if you feel that way. If you feel like when I started, I felt like there was definitely more pressure from the press.
Yeah, but that's only a reflection of how the public feel about the football team.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't write about the football team if nobody cared about the football team.
I would say, looking at the players I played, I said there's players in there that I think could have dealt with it easily. I think they're confident enough. They believe in their own ability. If they had a bad game, they'd hold their hands up, and I think they deal with it fine. But I reckon there would definitely been some players that it would affect them a lot.
Yeah. Did you feel that in a specific tournament in terms of say for instance 2002 Japan, was it when we got beat by Brazil? We had a great chance, a fantastic squad of progressing, but if you compare different.
There's no doubt those guys were good enough. No doubt they were good enough. They won Champions League.
I think I noticed it
definitely
more,
good enough.
More the further I played. For me, that was my first tournament, so I was just kind of buzzing to be there and just enjoying it. I think it was the more I played, I noticed it, and you could feel it, and it was, I don't know why we'd have new papers the day after a game in the hotel. No, I know you can hear about it going in, but I just don't. If we're getting slated or anything, there's just no point in having it in there. The negativity.
If
I
the
don't
press
think
are getting
having it
close to you as
around.
players, are broadcasters getting close as well? Was you in and around?
The relationship between football and its media, I could talk about for hours and hours and hours. It's probably been the biggest change in all the years that I've spent in the game, how the two have grown apart and the distrust has grown. And so you've actually now got media offices within football clubs whose job is not to promote media contact, it's to try to avoid it if possible. It's to try to
I think that's
certainly
what
try to
you
manage
notice
it.
with players after games. You had to walk through
The mixer.
the media, and a lot of people, some just wouldn't talk in the end. They just got fed up with the media. I think.
I can understand that completely. I think the fault is as much ours as it is football's. But I commentated on England-Iceland in 2016. And my wife and I have been out with Roy and Sheila Hodgson. He's a friend.
Yeah.
And about 2 minutes from the end of that game, I've got somebody in my ear saying, you're going to have to say he needs to go. And I said, fine. I commented, I've got a little lazy button where I can speak back. And I said, I commentated on the 99 Champions League final. I'll wait for the final whistle if you don't mind before I actually nail him to the cross. But Roy knew. Roy was gone. Roy had resigned pretty much before the players had got off the field. He knew he didn't need telling. But sure enough, I had to say about a friend that his position is now untenable. And if you want to know if my job ever gets difficult, that's probably when it gets its most difficult. But he had on the field that night some of the most gifted footballers that we've seen, let alone played with. But the moment Iceland equalised, and don't think we were given a penalty in the second minute. Yeah, and that's what you only need to score the first goal against Iceland. You're better than Iceland. You just can't afford to let them get ahead because they're very difficult to chase the game against.
Well, I scored against Iceland.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, for England. Yeah.
I mean,
I think it was 6-1, something like that. I think I got the fifth or sixth.
Yeah, it's a slightly different Iceland by them, but the players just dissolved before our very eyes, and there were bubbles coming out of their heads during the second half when they couldn't control it and couldn't pass it. Yeah. I mean, Wayne Rooney, Jack Wilshere, really, really technical, talented players, and you could see the bubble thinking, "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here," and that's actually what it was. You don't want to be there, do you?
What?
Not really. It's so
You're proud to play for your country.
You are so proud, but when it's not going right, you do wonder if people on that pitch are thinking,
what we're going to get from this?
What comes off
What's
the back of this? We need a goal. I think once you get that goal, you do relax. But I reckon there is definitely something going on in the players.
Do you talk to each other about it during the game?
Oh no, 100% not. No, honestly.
Why? Just that as a macho, sort of an ego, bravado, sort of.
You are concentrating on the game. You know what it's like.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Because I'm a bit like I would get nervous before games. But I'm very much like I would get across that white line, and it's just you're just in concentration mode. But I do think the longer that game goes on, and you're expected to win, and you haven't got that goal, it might start to creep in a little bit.
Yeah. Clive, what tournament for you do you think was the biggest? Not disappointing because we know, say for instance, 2014. Brazil was a bad one, but in terms of where we potentially should have gone on to, or had our best chance to win a World Cup,
well, then,
in your opinion,
probably maybe 2004, 2006 were where we looked like something might happen, and because I've never been across the white line myself, I will always bow to the opinion of ex-professionals, or Ali McCoy or whoever's sitting next to me. So I'm not going to sit here and judge the golden generation, but I will argue with anybody who says, I don't think they were quite as good as they made out. They were. They were definitely. Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney, Ashley Cole,
Scholes.
Paul Scholes. I mean, they were amongst the very best players in their position in the world. And I think they showed that, all of them really, in Champions League football. So it's something to do with the England problem. And what we do have now, and okay, he's a mate and he was at our wedding, and so, I care about him. But we have somebody in charge who, whether you think he's the best coach in the world or the best manager in the world, or whether you think he makes the substitutions at the right time, for the England job and all of the responsibility that goes with managing England, all the diplomacy you've got to show, making judgments at the moment about Kyle Walker and Ivan Toney, whether you've got to justify having them in your team because you're going to get asked about it. Gareth Southgate is just a big grown-up man who is a very intelligent, very very thoughtful individual. And whatever you think about any issue to do with England, he'll be way ahead of you. He'll have thought it through already. And that's why we're in good hands. And I just hope that the players now realise the potential they've shown and go on and crown his time in charge with a success, because I think he's managed England so well at a really, really difficult time.
I think he's done quite well in terms of they seem really close as a team.
No, he's definitely changed the culture and the environment.
No kids.
And he's let.
I think it was
he's let
true under
people
Roy,
into
in
the
fairness. I
squad
think
a
that's
little bit.
start happened under Roy.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And I think, you know, Roy's regime was very popular with the players. Roy and Ray Lewington, Gary Neville was part of that team. And I think all that sort of Liverpool stood at one table, Manchester United said, I think that had all gone away by then. And, you know, they didn't have the best of luck in 16. But I just think everything's magnified now. I think even in the last 10 years, the pressures, the jeopardy on footballers has changed, you know, with social media and so on and so forth. And to have to manage these players who don't belong to you, who just sort of come into your realm for the space of, well, actually, it's only 10 days, really. And it's often now 3 games in 10 days. So you've got no time with them on the training ground. And then have to deal with the issues that arise as a result of the selections you've made. I think he's a wonderful man. And the only thing I can tell you about Gareth Southgate is that is him. There's no front. That's the man. That is the man. That's the man I know.
He's a great guy.
That's Ali's husband.
Yeah.
That's the girl's dad. That is definitely him.
Yeah. Just before we move on, just leaving it on Gareth, you're talking to him as a friend and what you see. Do you think it was right for him to stay on? I know it's very hard to walk away from an England job, but would you have liked to have seen him step away in terms of the potential that what that squad's got? He feels as though he can get them, and we're getting ever so close.
I'm just totally split in two in answer to that question. On the one hand, I'm absolutely convinced he's the right man for the job. On the other hand, he's a mate who I don't want any harm to come to of any kind. And last June was really, really difficult for him, and I know that. And he doesn't open up to me in a big way, but we exchange messages, and the vibes coming off, and there's no doubt how disturbing that was for him. But his reasoning is just so Gareth that in the end, the decision came down to not how this is affecting me. I've signed a 2-year contract. I'm an honourable man. I will see this 2-year contract through if England and the players want me. The decision he took was whether my presence is starting to infect the whole squad and team and the whole England picture. If just whoever he picks is now Gareth Southgate's England and therefore is doomed to failure, then he would have stepped back and he would have said, on you go, do it with somebody else. But as soon as he was assured, and I think we played well enough at the World Cup finals for that issue, if you like, to go away a little bit, then there's no doubt that he has the loyalty to see out his contract, and he'll do it. He'll do it properly.
Well, we are right behind them, and hopefully we can go always one further in the next tournaments. Look, let's get back onto the Premier League. Is it true you're a big Man United fan?
I was a Manchester United fan home and away in my teens. I'm from Bury. My dad was a big United fan. He took me when I was 5. I actually went to Gig Lane, Bury, before I was born. We lived next door to the Bury manager, would you believe? When I came into the world, our next door neighbour was the manager of Bury. And my mum went to watch them play when she was pregnant. So I should have been a Bury fan. And I'm a bit of a closet Bury fan to this day. But my dad took me to Old Trafford, and they had Best and Charlton, and Bury didn't. And they were glorious times to be a young football fan.
Yeah.
But when I got my dream job and I got into radio straight from university, suddenly I was spending nearly all my time with Nottingham Forest players who were the same age as me. Martin O'Neill was my first big friend in football and is still a great friend to this day. And no football fan would understand it, but it just went away. The whole Manchester United thing went away. Yeah. And the first TV game I ever did was Manchester City 5, Manchester United 1 in 1989. And I wasn't at all perturbed about the result. If anything, it was early relationship with Fergie. It was still a bit difficult. And I had more friends probably at Main Road as it was then, in the camp at Main Road. Mel Metchin was really, really good to me. So I was actually pleased for the likes of David White and Ian Brightwell and, the guys that played, Ian Bishop, who played in that team. They were mates of mine. So, yeah, and it's gone away to this day. And who do I support now? I support my mates.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Well, look, Man United, they've got through to the FA Cup final, semi-final on the weekend, beating Fulham. Bridgie, we mentioned last week, Ashley Barnes getting two of the quickest yellow cards probably in the history of football. Fulham had 3 people dismissed in 270 seconds. I mean, it was a moment of madness. I don't know whether you guys see the game.
I got back I was at Bramall Lane, but I got back to see the second half.
Yeah. I mean, they controlled the game for 75 minutes and they threw it away. But how much of that would Marco Silva have to look at and go, well, if I didn't lose my temper, then Mitrovic might have slid on the pitch and we could have had a better chance. I think at 1-1, if the penalty still goes in, they've still got a great chance with 10 men rather than 9.
I was a little bit like, if you're going to get sent off, you might as well do something worthy of getting sent off. You might as well go full Duncan Ferguson and have a right go instead of a... Do you know what I mean? You can't touch the ref.
No.
For one.
No.
And even the little chest, it's just handbags in it. And he'll look back and probably
It was almost a complaint, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's definitely.
No, you're saying it's terrible. You should be able to touch the ref.
No, you're not saying not that you should be able to touch the ref, because obviously the respect to the game. A rugby player obviously would never do it. They always say what footballers are like, and you do get wound up in the moment, but you just can't, can you? And like I said, that's why I'm a bit like, if you're going to do something, then they might as well do it properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's controlling emotions, isn't it?
It's very tough.
It's fascinating. I'm just writing a media program for the PFA for former players. I'm going to be part of a media course which the PFA are going to run in order to help players get ready for a career either in coaching or management or maybe the media. And I've talked a lot about in the interview section that the post-match interview. I mean, you've done them. I've got a really good friendship with Mick McCarthy, and the first time I met Mick was at a charity golf thing, and somebody sort of said, "Do you know Mick?" And I sort of said, "Yeah." And he said, "No, you don't." And he shook my hand, and he looked into my eyes. I said, "Well, I've interviewed you." He says, "Aye, but that's all." He says, "That's not Mick McCarthy." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The guy that walks out of the dressing room at 10-5, whose team just got beaten 3-0. Yeah. He said, "And you're the first person I meet, and you're going to start asking me difficult questions. That's not Mick McCarthy you're talking to."
It's very true, isn't it?
And you've got to somehow try to manage your emotions. Yeah. And it's easy for us to stand a step back and just scratch our heads because it's a clear penalty.
Yeah.
And it's a clear red card.
Yeah.
So what on earth are Mitrovic and the manager getting worked up about, except you do?
Yeah.
It's football.
It's emotions. It's hard.
Yeah, it is clear. I'll tell you what, though, some refs, I'm not blaming the ref at all for this, but you've had it. You might have had it. I've definitely had it. With some refs, they can just wind you up in a way that they won't even speak to you. They literally just ignore you, and you're even just trying to speak to them. I guess he was obviously speaking and he was quite aggressive. I think the ref just ignoring him and not giving him the time of day definitely helped him lose his head a bit more. Yeah. I think, some refs for me they can just wind you up the wrong way.
Look, we're getting to the crunch part of the season, aren't we? Clive, how have you found the season in general? Premier League, it's a bit unprecedented with the World Cup in the middle, but are you shocked to see where certain clubs are? Or are you...
Well, the bottom half's fascinating, obviously. And that's, we have this thing about it'll go all the way to the wire. And we thought we might have a title race 2-3 months ago involving more than 2 teams. I think at the top, I think Manchester City are not quite right. I have a theory about this, that Liverpool and Manchester City have been beating each other up for the last 5 years for our entertainment. And it's been fantastic. The rivalry has just been so intense. 2 of the title races they've had have literally gone into the last 15, 20 minutes of the final game. They've been absolutely wonderful rivalries in Europe and in domestic competition. And I think they're a bit weary. And I think that actually the 2 truly great managers they've got are a little bit weary. And Arsenal are really good.
Yeah.
I mean, we all hopefully admit our mistakes in football. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have given Mikel Arteta more than a couple more months. Not just because of the results, but I actually felt, and I didn't say it publicly in a commentary, that he was asking the players to do something they couldn't do. Well, I was wrong. And he carried on asking the same questions of them. And eventually they found answers. And they're a wonderful football team to watch. I thought All or Nothing was a terrible mistake. Opening the doors, seeing them fail.
I thought it was a great watch.
Well, it was a great watch. But if you were in that dressing room and you didn't win that Champions League spot, and they were playing better than Tottenham in the closing weeks of last season, but they did, blow it. It did come
fire in their belly to go and do it.
Well, as I say, I think probably what the programme gave us was an insight into the fortitude that he'd built, which I thought was a little bit kind of theatrical, watching the programme and actually even listening to his interviews at the end of last season. But I was totally wrong about him. And, there's a big debate at the moment about who Arsenal's man of the season is. For me, it's Mikel Arteta. I think they are a wonderful commercial for his coaching ability, the way they play. And I think they'll see it through. I do.
At the other end of the table, we're looking at the likes of Southampton, Bournemouth, Forest, Everton, Wolves, Leeds, Leicester, Palace. Any of them could go down. West Ham are in there as well. Bridgie, we touched on this last week. Can you remember your three?
I think whatever I say, they seem to go and win. So I think I said Leeds to go down,
Yes.
Southampton and Leeds. I said Everton will be out of it.
Bournemouth.
I thought Bournemouth, the way they...
Can you remember it?
You didn't actually say you...
I didn't confirm my third time. I didn't want it. I don't think you can call it. I just don't think you can call it. I thought the way Bournemouth had been playing, there seemed like a bit of a belief there that I just fancied them to get out of it.
Okay. So you're still sitting on the edge of the third?
I'm still sitting on the edge. Okay. I am, to be honest.
Let's have your league winner and an FA Cup winner from you, please. League winner. Who's going to win the league? Can Arsenal do it?
I think Arsenal, after what they did against Bournemouth, the last-minute winner and the way they've been playing, I don't want them to win it, but I just think that the way they've been playing, everything.
FA Cup, Man City, United, Brighton or Sheffield United?
I've got to go City, being an ex-Blue, I've got to go City. I think Man United have been very inconsistent. I know Man City have as well, but I think Man United have been too up and down. But if they both end up in the final, then... Yeah. It's one of them games. It's going to be a tough, but I just fancy City to take it.
Clive, bottom three.
I commentated on Sheffield United versus Blackburn on
what a game
last weekend.
Wow,
a terrific match.
Yeah,
and a little bit of sort of sapphire and steel. There were a few more long balls than you might see perhaps in a Premier League game, but I think actually they were both at it, and they probably played more long balls than they would do in a Championship game. I think they're two teams that can play. But there were some really excellent players on the field, and Jai and Sander Berger, really elegant, good footballers. So I won't answer the question you asked me, but I think what's coming up will be interesting. And I think because Burnley are clearly very, very good, looks like Sheffield United or Middlesbrough. And then whoever comes out of the playoffs, if Blackburn are anything to go by, are going to be a really good team. And I've watched both teams quite a lot in the build-up to Sunday's game.
Yeah.
And I think the good news for them is that because there are 10 relegation candidates in the Premier League, whichever 3 goes down, there are going to be 7 that weren't particularly good. So I think it's a good season to get promoted from the Championship. I think, some of the teams that escape this time will be relegation candidates again next season.
Yeah. I'm going to put it on you. Arsenal or Man City for the league?
Oh, Arsenal.
Do you really think,
I'm not absolutely convinced, but I've given it some thought.
Yeah.
And
the first week I said Arsenal, so hopefully they lose next week.
I think it'll be Arsenal or Manchester City. I think.
Yeah, of course.
That's the kind of punditry that you wanted, wasn't it?
We'll sit on the fence again. Quick odds on the FA Cup winner outright. Manchester United are 9-4 to win the FA Cup. Odds there from Virgin Bet. Look, it's time now to play our new game, the Virgin Bet Builder game. Each week, our friends at Virgin Bet have picked out a match for us to do 5 predictions. Match result, correct score, and first goal scorer. We'll then have 2 mystery markets of their choosing. Each correct prediction will win you a point. The harder the prediction, the more the points. A reminder that if our guests beat Wayne Bridge over the series, you'll be buying me dinner. But if you beat our guests, then I'll be buying you dinner. And it looks like I'll be having to book a table, Wayne, because
at
you
Zuma.
are Yes, because you had a scorcher last week. You beat Charlie Adam by the same scoreline that City beat Burnley 6-0. So at the moment, you are 11-1 up in the series. So Clive, we need some help. We need some help.
There's £50 note. It's fine. So I'm going an 8-all draw. Thanks, Wayne.
Right. So this week I'm going to try. And claw it back. We've got the usual 3 and a couple more interesting ones. And we're going to go for the international break. So we're heading to Italy with England for our trips for hopefully
I wish
a Euro qualifier. So 3 predictions for the Bet Builder. Clive, I'm going to go to you first. So can I have, please, the first goal scorer, who's going to win, and the correct score, please?
Italy 1, England 2. So that's an England win, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really going to stick my neck out on the first goal scorer. I'm going to go for he's actually England captain, and he does score goals, and he's called Harry Kane.
You have got inside information.
You can't have him.
Camp.
I'm going a bit wilder for the others.
I can have Harry Kane, can't I?
You can have whoever you want. Yeah.
Right, I can. But I'm gonna go different.
So England
give
won.
You a chance.
England, Harry Kane.
England win 2-1.
2-1.
Harry Kane scores the first goal.
There we go.
I'm going Harry Kane.
Yep.
Is this first goal scorer? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going Harry Kane first goal scorer, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Oh.
And is this what was the other thing?
That's it.
Yeah, 1-1 draw.
Yeah. So
1-1,
draw. Yeah.
Harry
Okay.
Kane.
So the next 2 are going to be the mystery markets. Is the last goal scorer. So the last goal scorer and a player to be carded in the game. So Clive, I'm going to go to you first again.
I'm giving you the same answer for both. Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire will head the winner very soon after being shown a yellow card.
Really? Yes. Love that. That's brilliant. So that could get me back in the game.
Do you know what? I'm going Harry Kane, obviously, but I was going to go Harry Maguire, but I'm going to give you a chance, Siddy.
What, Harry Maguire own goal? You've got 1-1.
No. Yeah, I could do that, actually. That'd be right. Harry Kane. I was going to go Harry Maguire for yellow card and give you a chance.
Off Harry Maguire, will you?
Have you gone for him for the yellow card?
Of course I've gone for a yellow card. He's combative.
Verratti, yellow card. There you go.
So Verratti for the yellow, to be carded, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look, there's our predictions. If you want to build your bet, you can. Just download the Virgin Bet app and head over to Bet Builder. Please visit Virgin Bet for full terms and conditions. You have to be over 18 to play. And please gamble responsibly. We're all big advocates of that on this table as well. We've got to talk about Champions League. I know you're looking forward to this section. Look, we've got to start on 99 with Manchester United. That was
1999.
1999.
I did the 1899 final too.
The Manchester United final, 1999 Champions League. I mean, it's iconic. The ending to it, the commentary. You obviously having being a Manchester United fan when you're obviously growing up.
Yeah, that really didn't matter by then, to be honest. It really
but even
didn't.
just the line that it's Manchester United, they always score, wasn't it? I think it was
which
like
was
that.
Inaccurate. They drew 0-0 at Blackburn the week before. It was, I think, I made mention of the late, great Brian Moore, who was my predecessor, who retired after the 98 World Cup final. So it was a massive match for me a year on from that. I suppose I was still kind of on trial. And if I'd messed up those 2 or 3 minutes in front of an audience or whatever, 20-odd million, then, they'd have probably moved me on and tried to find somebody more senior to come in. So they were important. They're important minutes in my career, quite apart from anything. It wasn't a very good game, you know.
No.
The last 10 minutes were sensational. Yeah. Bayern hit the woodwork twice, 1-0 up, and they hit the woodwork twice. And obviously the 2 substitutes scored the goals. And what I always say about that game is, there's an element of sort of Fergie's, the greatest post-match interview ever, football bloody hell, i.e. don't ask me what happened there. Yeah. It did. And there was that element of fate. But if you had a corner kick to win a football match in 1999, who would you want taking it? Of anybody in the world? David Beckham. If you were going to play a near post corner, who would you want on the near post more than anybody in the world? Probably Teddy Sheringham. And if you had brought on a substitute to react to a ball coming to him at
so
waist
true,
height
isn't
it? It is,
and
yeah.
side-foot it
It's mad, really.
into the roof of the net,
Never thought
past
about
the
it.
guy on the line.
Yeah.
It was actually the most perfect set piece, and it was executed by 3 of the very best practitioners of what they did in the world. That's not luck.
No.
That's rehearsal.
Yeah. So how? Just talk us through how, because like we said there about the game being emotionally and being wrapped up in it. How hard or how easy is it for you to just get it out naturally in terms of what Man United just achieved there into scoring the 2 goals to win the Champions League final in the last few minutes?
Well, I think I did say some things which fortunately have become kind of part of people's memories of the match. Obviously, there were 90,000 in the stadium, but there were 25 million watching it on TV. It was a TV event for most of the people that saw it. I think probably if I listen back to it, the best pieces of the commentary, if you listen after the 2 goals, the 2 Manchester United goals, I say nothing for about 8 seconds after each. My mentor in the business was another late great, Reg Guttridge, a boxing commentator who took me under his wing and taught me a lot. And he always promoted the value of silence in television commentary. But he used to say to me, it's not resting time, it's thinking time. When you're not saying something, you should be thinking about what comes next. And after a goal, late in a game, what comes next should be tomorrow morning's headline, tomorrow morning's tabloid headline. You should be able to editorialize that moment, come up with the importance of it. And he said a great goal deserves far more than, oh, amazing, fantastic, wonderful. It deserves some kind of conclusion which will put it in its place for all time. So I said, name on the trophy when they equalised, which was a bit sort of slightly bizarre, but it was that feeling that this is meant to be, trebles on, and even though they haven't played particularly well tonight, they found an equaliser. Their name must be on the trophy. And Solskjaer's one, it was sort of, it actually broke the cardinal rule of commentary because there was still a minute to play, and if Bayern had gone down the other end and equalised, had gone to extra time penalties, they'd have won the penalty shootout, wouldn't they? They were Germans. And an effigy of me would have been hanging from the Arndale Centre by midnight, you know. But you sense that the equaliser had flattened Bayern. We'd never really been used to seeing German football faces beaten. It was that generation, really, where if you think back to the Euro 96 final and the strut of Andy Muller after he scored the penalty, you know, when Gareth had his saved. That was German football. And even Mateus coming off essentially to clean his hands to go and get the trophy, the one trophy he'd never lifted. And then Basler, who'd scored the goal, came off and he was conducting the crowd. Yeah. And they knew they'd won, except it's football. And they hadn't. It's football, bloody hell. And they hadn't won. And the faces of the Bayern fans, it was almost like they'd witnessed some terrible car accident or something. They were just in shock. Yeah. And that was with the equaliser. And they were just there to be beaten then.
I mean, we moved into the millennium then, and I've just written down here the notes, like Arsenal at Highbury, United Old Trafford, Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, Liverpool at Anfield. There was some great nights at all of them. And I mean, what was it like? Was there a real... We spoke last week about the Anfield atmosphere on a Champions League night. Was there a real sense of a different aspect of the game on a Champions League evening?
Were you there for the ghost goal with 05, the semi-final?
No, Garcia.
I didn't play.
But you were there, were you?
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. You know, I always get asked best atmosphere, and you always upset somebody. But Celtic Park and Anfield on a European, and maybe it's You'll Never Walk Alone, which they both sing with the scars up. But I mean, there's the commentary position at Celtic Park is like a little crow's nest which sort of hangs from this antique roof, and it literally rocks around. The poor camera guy next to you is holding on for dear life, trying to cover the game when the place is bouncing. And you know, there's some great atmospheres in British football, but very few of them that are intimidating, like in Greece or Turkey. But Anfield is pretty. I would think when you walk out of Anfield, you know, you see the sign and maybe even touch the side of your Wout Weghorst wrong. But you know you're up against more than 11 guys in red, don't you?
Definitely, yeah. And the Champions League, as a player, the Champions League music for me is just brilliant going out. You do feel the difference. But Chelsea at the time, Chelsea-Liverpool, it was a massive rivalry. I mentioned last week about Liverpool fans after one of the games. They were still there the day after, and we were on a coach, and it kicked off. They were chasing after the coach, smashing the coach. There's a massive rivalry. Mourinho hated Liverpool with a passion, and it was massive. But I think for me, the ones that stand out the most in terms of atmosphere, probably Everton.
Yeah,
they're so close to the pitch.
Yeah. We're talking about Champions League though, but
Champions
to
League,
stay
obviously,
on
but
Champions
atmosphere.
League, Bridgie, you've obviously the highlight of one of your highlight of your career. Would you say scoring the goal at
it has to be.
Clive,
really. I don't.
Clive, you
score,
commentated
mate.
the
You
game.
Did commentate, yeah.
I did. Yeah, he remembers it.
I do remember it. I do remember it.
It was a terrific game.
Oh, it was a great goal.
This is amazing, but you must have notes for that game. I was actually going to ask you.
I was looking for them this morning and I couldn't find them.
We'll have to see if you find them. But for me, it was just unbelievable. You know, you could see by my face, and I remember it.
I just should have scored about 10 minutes earlier. There was one kicked off the line. I'd had a big chance. Didn't
Ashley Cole just cleared one off the line, and then a few minutes later, I just remember getting the ball, 1-2 of Ida, and. You know, I've obviously watched it more than once, but it was Wayne Bridge, Ardigan Johnson. It's Bridge. It's in. It's Chelsea's night.
And the Chelsea fans were in the corner, weren't they?
Yeah, I went straight in, just waved everyone over.
Great ground, great place.
The hybrid was great. Oh, good. The pitch, everything. It was such a lovely stadium.
Best tunnel for a ruck in English football, I would say.
Yeah.
Narrow, can't get away from the guy who wants to fight you.
Right.
Yeah.
We hadn't beat them for years. I don't know who you were commentating with that night.
Big Ron.
But I was at Big Ron. I remember it panned to Ranieri, and he was going absolutely mental, and he must have said, "Oh, calm down," over the commentary. He was going mental.
Big Ron.
Yeah.
It's not over yet.
He looks happy. Calm down.
He's going back to 99. That's why. That's what Ron was doing. No, Chelsea didn't obviously make it to their final that year, but they did go and get it in Munich with the Drogba header again. Another last gasp sort of hurrah.
I mean, I think one or two teams have won the Champions League when they've not been at their best. Yeah. I wonder whether I said that. Listen, Manchester City are absolutely fantastic, but I don't think they're quite right this season. And as a result of that, there's a part of me thinks they might just do it this season. You know, I mean, they've got a really tough quarter-final now, but I mean, that wasn't Chelsea's finest team. No. But by the way, I mean, listen, Alan Shearer's a mate of mine, best centre forward the Premier League's ever seen. I think Drogba played teams on his own some nights. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
Unbelievable. That header was unbelievable. He used to just bully people. And I think players used to find it so annoying to play against him because he was so strong that he'd bully them, but then he'd get a little nudge and he'd just dive on the floor and roll about. And they found it so hard because they'd want to compete with him and be strong, but then he was great at diving.
You don't know my commentary after when Drogba equalised? What about that?
Yeah.
What about that?
Drogba, what about that? It was a bullet header. Look, he was the go-to man. Liverpool had the go-to man in Steven Gerrard as well. Istanbul.
Oh God,
I mean, we all thought it was all over at half-time. And no one see that comeback. But again...
nobody. I was looking up in the record books all half-time for the,
bigger scores.
Bigger scores.
Really.
And so on. And that was... I'm going to be really, really cruel here. That was one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. There were 5 or 6 players in that Liverpool team who deserved 2 medals. Stephen probably deserved about 3. And there were 5 or 6 who really didn't deserve a medal at all. It wasn't a particularly good Liverpool team. They played much better 2 years later against Milan and lost. But if you look at that lineup, I mean, there's some very strange names in it. Harry Kewell only lasted half an hour or so. But Stephen played in 3 different positions that night. And whenever I was around football on Merseyside at the time of the great team of the late 70s and early 80s, whenever anybody asked me to put together my all-time Liverpool 11, I almost start with him because he didn't have Dalglish in his team, he didn't have Hansen, and he didn't have Rush in his team, and he didn't have Clemens in goal. And so, I mean, there must have been times when you were playing against Liverpool. I know Chelsea tried to buy him in that era, when you thought you were almost playing against him and Jamie, I think.
He was amazing. It was like, in the England setup, just watching him play his passing, the way he was a proper leader. It just didn't seem to gel with him and Lamps in midfield sometimes. But for me, he was just unbelievable. And we did try to buy him because I remember as Chelsea players, we were chatting to him in the England setup. Yeah. You know, I
He
don't
was
know if
very
this
close.
is true.
Yeah, he
oh,
was,
he's very.
he was.
Don't know how true this is, but he was definitely getting threats from fans. 100%, I would have thought.
Yeah,
you
and
hear
also,
it.
and also love from fans saying,
Yeah.
"Please don't go."
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was loved and adored, and he loved the club, didn't he? So for him to leave, it would have took
You always
a lot
knew
of something
playing
special
against
for him to
Stevie.
leave.
You always knew when you come off the pitch that
Yeah.
you've had a tough game.
He was always one of England's best players
I like
whenever he
him
played.
a lot. I hope,
he's a
I
great
hope
player.
management turns out well for him. I've actually worked for Rangers TV for the year of the lockdown, the year that they won the league back under him, and so I got quite close to him again. Then, and so I've got a feeling for his absolute passion for the game. I'm not quite sure why it didn't happen at Villa, because it was a wonderful opportunity for him. But there you go. I mean, now we're looking at a situation where his successor's having a bit of a problem sustaining success there.
Yeah.
I can imagine he's very not demanding of the players, but he demands quality a bit like Mourinho, because he worked so hard.
Yeah.
In training, he was always on top form, so I can imagine he demands quality.
Yeah, the best day.
Fascinating, because I would count him as a friend, and I hope he would say the same. And in the build-up to a Rangers game, he would help me with squad and maybe some team ideas. I would often speak to him on the phone on the morning of a game, and then I'd get to the stadium and see him maybe at 1:30 briefly. They were in lockdown time, so we had to kind of socially distance. Different guy. Different guy. On the phone in the morning, he was talking about Alex and the kids and how how's your wife and stuff, and then maybe give me a bit of information. But then when he got the game face on, I'm thinking it's me. It's still me. He treated me totally different because he was in the zone.
Just before we close the pod, I just want to go on to look. We've gone into your whole career and how brilliant you've been and what you've done, but it feels like there's just been a little bit of a tarnish at the end with ITV in terms of the way, I suppose the way it was dealt from the outset. I don't know whether you could enlighten us in terms of being the lead commentators for ITV and then being told that you're not going to be sort of leading the light.
A lot of people were shocked as well, like the voice, and you must have got a lot of love, because I put some stuff in my gut, and I knew you got a lot of love because everyone was surprised, and all of my mates are just like they just couldn't.
Well, no one
really
likes
believe
change,
it.
do they?
Yeah, no one.
Well, I
likes
suppose
change.
it's a bit of a veiled compliment that people are still talking about it 2.5 years on, which is a consolation of a kind. I said right at the beginning, our careers are not dissimilar. We're all a matter of opinion. So we're all up for somebody's selection. And if you don't get selected, you sit stewing on the substitutes bench, muttering under your breath, and maybe the manager can hear you say, "For God's sake, boss, have you seen him? Am I really not better than him?" And I suppose, if I'm honest, there's a bit of that going on with me to this day. But it's gone. It's no big deal. It's a first world problem. Who's commentating on a football match? There's plenty going on in the world which is far more important. I'm a very happy man. I've never been happier in my life. I've been a very, very lucky boy in my career, and I'm still working. So I can put it into perspective. But, if I can capture the frustrations that you must have had at the times when you were being left out of teams, how many commentators are there working every weekend on the Premier League and major platforms? You've got either Sky or BT are doing it live, so you've got BBC Match of the Day, you've got Premier League productions for the World Feed, you've got NBC doing it for America, you've got 5 Live, you've got Talk Sport. So, there are 10 fixtures per weekend and probably 6 or 7 different major platforms covering them. Different commentators will do 2 days. So, but you're talking 35, 40 commentators, aren't you? I'm a freelance. I'm available for employment for any of them. I don't work many weekends. I do a few for Talk Sport, and I do a couple of seasons for Amazon Prime. Now, I'm not so vain that I think that I'm the best commentator out there, but I'm one of the best frickin' 35. and I am. It is a frustration, but it's no more than that.
Yeah.
It's I've got. When ITV moved me on, it came as a shock. It was a massive disappointment. Was I hurt? Kind of, but define hurt. It's not hurt that other people feel. It didn't leave me with any major financial issues, didn't leave me with any mental issues, and it hasn't stopped the world turning. So, man up, Clive, and get on with it, really, is the message. And I still think I can do the job, and I still want to do the job, and I still do it with the same thoroughness and enthusiasm than ever I did. So I mentor half a dozen media students every year, and it's great that some of them have quite a few of them now, 10 or 11, I think, are working full-time. So I just need them to get to director of football situations so that they can employ me before I die.
Well, you are a legend. You are an icon of the game. And I'm sure there's many, many more years to come.
Burying John Watson this week.
Oh, right, yes.
We're burying John Watson this
another
week.
legend.
Now that is a legend.
Yes.
So there you go. I mean, perspective.
Yeah. Well, our thoughts go out to all his family. Just 3 quick questions before we wrap. Just quick questions. Your favourite ground to commentate on or at?
Anfield.
Least favourite ground that you've had to climb up a ladder to get to the gantry?
I can think of a few back in the day where I don't like a vertical ladder particularly. Do you know some in the first couple of rounds of the FA Cup where they build the gantry and then you've got to climb up a window cleaner's ladder, Runcorn. You can't see once you get at the top.
Yeah.
Still can't see the
Dell
pitch.
like? The Dell?
The Dell. The Dell was okay. It was kind of on the roof.
Okay,
It was on the... You couldn't really see the near touchline.
Yeah. And last one, a favourite game that we haven't really touched on, or people that might not associate.
Well,
moment.
If I can... I mean, I'm well aware that the average age of, Joe's subscribers and stuff is probably, I don't know, under 35. And sometimes I encourage people to go back and look at a game or look at a goal. Look at 2 things. Look at the 4th Brazilian goal in the 1970 World Cup final. Find that and watch it.
Yeah.
Because it might be the greatest goal that's ever been scored. And it's in a World Cup final.
Coolness personified.
Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be at Anfield for the famous Liverpool 4, Newcastle 3, which Stan Collymore's late goal won. And if there's an extended edit of that anywhere on YouTube, it's just the most wonderful football match.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, Clive, it's been absolutely brilliant. We could go for hours and hours and hours. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. And we, not just me and Bridgie, but I'm sure everyone else listening, we hope and pray that you're still the voice of football for many years to come.
It's in!
There we go.
Love it.
Remember to find us on the Joe YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast from. You have been watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Virgin Bet.
You've been watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Virgin Bet.